Well, here. No, you can turn it on when you need it. And I don't know, Dave over here. Dave, you want it? Or I can pass it back. You can pass it to Anna when you're done. Anna, how is? Did you officially graduate now? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Congratulations. Yeah. Oh yeah. How was your speech? Can you summarize it for us? You okay? Good. Good. We have a valedictorian in our midst. Yep, pretty big accomplishment. And going to WSU in the fall. Great. And I assume you're going to get a dorm and not try to commute or anything. Yeah. Especially with gas prices, if they keep going up, that could be a challenge besides the time commitment. Yeah, still. Right. I don't know. Well, I won't ask you how much it is, but I'm sure it's not too cheap. And let's see, anything else to share? Any interesting news or anecdotes from anybody? Mark Redlosk up there and we went to the Pacific Northwest Wells District Convention, I think. I'd never actually been to one of these before. The first one was right after Paul was born, and so I skipped it. And then the second one was canceled due to COVID, and we just voted online. But this is by far the most boring of all the gatherings I've ever attended. Have you, Jim, have you attended one before? Or, yeah, okay. I mean, it's not bad. It's just kind of necessary reports and election of officers and review of the Synods' work, but it's fairly boring. They pack a lot in.
Good discussions, good visits with people there.
Yeah, yeah.
But most, I remember correctly, the most outstanding subject at that time is what shall the Wells CLC do in the future?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah. We didn't even have anything that interesting on the agenda this time.
Well, the thing is, though, they immediately discussed it for about 15, maybe an hour,
Yeah.
and then tabled it
Oh,
to committee.
okay. Yeah. That's been kind of an ongoing. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I know that they had this joint task force with representatives from both, and that task force came up with a statement that both could agree on. But then when they took the statement back to the bodies at large, it got tabled.
I became a Lutheran in 1963.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, there was some discussion of, in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But our young pastor out in the valley at Gethsemane
Yeah.
said, when my parents pass away, then there's a chance something might be done.
Oh, sure.
And they've since passed, and he's now
Yeah.
retired,
I've heard that I got nothing confidential here. I've heard that the new pastor over on Wall and Wellesley is a really nice person, and I keep thinking I should reach out and meet him sometime. I haven't done it yet, not just because it's been on the back burner, but yeah, they have a new younger person. I've actually watched one of their services online, and
we were married there
put it in.
58 years ago
No kidding.
in that church.
I didn't realize that. Oh, thank you.
No luck.
No luck? Well,
Not that I'm gonna try to destroy everything.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. We're still trying to get the Wells connection here. Couldn't figure it out. All right, well, yeah, interesting. But I'm trying to think, was there anything that came up in this meeting that would be... Well, Mark is going to share his impressions after the worship service, just for a minute or two, so... Oh, yeah, the singing was really great. In fact, I have and you know what's funny? When we all get together at these meetings, we almost always have guitars leading worship. Acoustic guitars, sometimes with piano. But the guy from Illum in Seattle, the new church that's starting there, it's a restart of the older churches, but, and I always enjoy that. I prefer acoustic guitar probably to anything else, so... if anybody wants to, if you got skills in acoustic guitar, please volunteer, and we'll have you play in worship. Yeah, yeah. I didn't look at you, but now I just did. Les, if, huh? Really? Huh? Oh, that sounds nice. Blues, Christian blues. Huh?
You were in New Orleans, and it was all Christian-based, Jesus-based,
Yeah. Hmm. Interesting. Huh. So they don't just play in churches, they go out to bars and places like that. That's nice. Sounds like an interesting outreach model. And yeah, you got to have a way to reach those places too. Any other interesting comments or things that happened throughout the week? A little bit of an update with Steve Anson. He's doing a little better. And I'm not a doctor, obviously. I attribute it to his finally being able to drink coffee. It's been months since he was able to drink coffee, and now he just seems to have really perked up a little bit. So possibly that's why. And he was able, well, I mean, I shouldn't be too he is on hospice care now, right? So they're not, and they have found this leaky aortic valve. But he's feeling, I don't know, confident and more energetic. Don't read too much into it, but that's how he's doing. He's hoping to get to his son's house. However, he has to be able to lower his oxygen quite a bit, because I guess there's only a certain level of oxygen you can take with you out of the hospital, and right now he's using too much oxygen at once that he needs to be there in the hospital. But I think if they get the oxygen down, he can go to his son Brad's house, which is definitely his preference. So,
realistically, though,
yeah,
that leaky, inoperable
yeah,
valve,
yeah,
the left ventricle is the workhorse of the heart,
sure,
the body.
yeah,
When that valve starts leaking,
yeah.
especially if they're not going to do anything about it.
No, they're not. And so,
Cowboy festival they have. Well, we got this one, Saucer Road.
saucered and blowed?
Steve says when the coffee was so hot, they poured it out over the saucer.
Oh,
Just sipped,
ah, interesting.
and then he explained how that expression came.
Okay, good.
You mentioned cowboy.
Yeah. And I have a little anecdote to share about him that I'll mention when I'm preaching, but I'll just briefly summarize. He was the treasurer during the building project of this building. So, and what's crazy about that is at that time, when this building was being built and he was the treasurer for it, he was older than I am now. So he's really been around and done a lot of stuff. So, yeah, I know. But, all the stuff we do, it feels so new and so exciting, but it's been done before, and even by people who maybe those of us who are younger don't realize they did all this stuff that we're doing now back in their day, and even more so, Yeah, so now he's been taken, he's not on him. Keep him in your prayers. Send him a card if you like, whatever. He'd appreciate anything, I think. But he's actually been in a good mood again, I think, because he's able to eat and able to have coffee. He's feeling really, really, really good. But all right, back to anything else? Fine to make it social time. Well, by the way, we could be in the basement, but there's what's that? Yeah, it's pretty bare, but I don't know if anyone wants. I think we could set up tables and then meet there next week. Yes. So that's what it is. Okay. Well, the other thing, next week I'll be here. Then the following weeks we have presentations, and maybe that'll be easier for them to do up here because that'll be more lecture style. We could record those too. All right, well, back to the book of Hebrews. We took last week off because we had 2 services, 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and we're in this long chapter. Basically, the whole point of the chapter is to say Jesus is like Melchizedek, and so it's not that complicated of a point. There's 2 different nuances that we'll come across here. The first one is Hebrews chapter 7, verses 11 through 22. Now, last week we looked at Melchizedek, but let's just review real quick. Who remembers? What do we know about Melchizedek? First of all, in Genesis 14, when the actual story takes place, what does Abraham do involving Melchizedek? Okay, he gives him a tithe, yeah. And what does Melchizedek do for Abraham? He blesses him. And that's more or less it, I think. I think there's bread and wine involved, but it's a pretty short account. And then what is said in Psalm 110, said concerning the Messiah, comparing him to Melchizedek. Yeah, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. That's what Psalm 110 says about the Messiah. And that's all the Bible says about Melchizedek, except for here, which is commenting on it. So let's go ahead and read verses 11 through 22. Any volunteer to read this section? If you can grab your microphone. Yeah, thanks.
If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, and indeed the law given to the people established that priesthood, why was there still a need for another priest to come, one on the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron? For when the priesthood is changed, the law must be changed also. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest, like Melchizedek, appears, one who has become a priest, not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. For it is declared, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect. And a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath. But he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantor of a better covenant.
Okay, thank you for reading that. We'll look at these look notes first. It's reminding us of the context. The early Jewish Christians were being asked to choose between 2 systems of religion, that of the Old Testament law and that of Christ. In this section, the writer is pointing out that there are 2 different systems of priests. Since we draw near to Jesus through priests, it is crucial that we choose the right system of priesthood as well as the right system of law. Verse 11, it talks about perfection. If perfection could have been attained, perfection is required for acceptance before a perfect and holy God. The Old Testament priesthood could not provide perfection. And we see that there in verse 11, and we see that at the very end, 22. He's the guarantor of a better covenant, that he provides perfection, while they did not. We see that kind of in verse 18 as well. The former regulation was weak and useless. It could not provide perfection, but he does. And then verse 12, a change of law. So the priesthood predicted in Psalm 110 would not come from the tribe of Levi. This presumed there would be a change in the law. In fact, the old covenant law was done away with, and a new covenant was established by Jesus on the basis of his blood. So both those are important points. The law has been transformed. Any comments on those notes? It's just pointing out the main points behind those two statements. Discussion question 1. Two things make it clear that Melchizedek and the one he pictured, Jesus, were of a different system than Aaron. Can you spot the two differences? Verse 13 and verse 16.
Verse 13, he is not the tribe of Levi, he is the tribe of Judah.
Okay.
So the priest of Moses were the tribes of Levi.
Okay, good. So that would be pretty clear. Different ancestry. All right. It says there's two. Can you spot one more difference? And it's not maybe that. It's more of a subtle.
Based on regulation, that he was not based on the regulation or based on, on 16. Who has become a priest not on the basis of a regulation to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of indestructible life?
Yeah, so not only is he from a different tribe, but the reason Jesus is priest is just because of who he is. Other priests, it's kind of random. It's like, well, we'll make your tribe the priests. Levi, why not? You'll be a good, and from now on, all the sons of Levi are priests, whether you're a scoundrel or you're a pretty good person or whatever. But Jesus is just inherently deserves to be a priest because of his nature, because of his being the Son of God, because of his being perfect. I think those are the 2 points. Can you see any other things that make Jesus different? Yep. Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, okay, good point. So he didn't actually go serve in the tabernacle. He served kind of in the, God's metaphysical altar in heaven, but he didn't actually offer, animals and things like that in the tabernacle. Good point. I think they're all kind of on the same general theme, so we'll go to 2. Why is it critical that a new priesthood replace that of Aaron? There's a couple ways you could answer.
Aaron was based on law, and the priesthood of Aaron was based on law.
Okay.
And Jesus' priesthood is based on the gospel.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I can see that. Good point. Yeah. Yeah, right. How else is, if they have to serve forever, and that's kind of a requirement of the perfect priest, none of those Old Testament priests can do it. Good point. Any others? Critical that Aaron's priesthood be replaced. Yeah, another good point. Lack of perfection. Any others? And again, like I said maybe a few weeks ago, to us this doesn't really hit home because we're not Jews and we've never been to Jerusalem and seen the tabernacle or seen the temple in operation. But to a crowd of people who grew up in Judaism, who was totally used to this and now being told to change, these were really helpful points. And I guess if you have any Jewish friends or anyone who's thinking about becoming Jewish or something, maybe this is a good book to have them read as well. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It would be quite a change. It's hard for me to imagine us changing to them, but because our way is obviously so much better. But imagine going up, well, not really. We lived in Hong Kong. It really doesn't matter once you get used to it. It's just-
Okinawa in 72,
Yeah.
they used to drive on the right-hand side.
Oh, yeah.
And then overnight, middle of the night, midnight, they switched.
No kidding. How did that go?
January 1st.
It went actually quite well.
Okay, I imagine people were probably scared out of their minds for a while driving. You know, what's funny is when I moved back here, and when there's traffic on the road, it's very easy to remember which system you're in. But whenever you get to a turn and there's no cars in any of the lanes, that's when you start to get really tripped out and not remember where you're supposed to turn, just so you know. But yeah, imagine just making a big change like that. A lot of people would resist it, and this is a good analogy. All right, question 3. Jesus' priesthood is linked to an indestructible life. Why is this indestructible life of Jesus so essential to our salvation? Yeah. Yeah, whereas Jesus, his life never ends. So if we had a priest with an expiration date, then we couldn't feel confident we could always go to him. That's an interesting phrase, indestructible life. I think that might be the only time it's used of Jesus. Any reaction to that phrase? It's kind of neat if you think about Jesus and all he did. What makes his life indestructible? Oh, Kelly, yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Sandy. Yeah. Well, and what's fascinating is that did Satan destroy his life? I mean, you'd think in a certain sense he did experience death, but yet he couldn't be kept down. He rose from the dead. He couldn't stay dead. Pretty amazing. Kind of like that phrase in Psalm 16, you will not let your Holy One see decay. He did briefly experience death, but then he just came right back, and he couldn't decay. He couldn't waste away. Any other thoughts on the indestructible life? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty neat. And it kind of goes back to this is just his inherent worthiness to be our priest. He didn't even have to really attain it. It's just this is who he is. And in his goodness and indestructibility, what he came into our world to save us. Any other thoughts? All right, that's good. I think we'll keep moving because it's all kind of similar points. Question 4, read 7:18 again. It says, the former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless. What weakness is there in the Mosaic Law? Well, if you're in the Tuesday Bible study, you've had ample illustrations of this. We just finished a year in Exodus, and what a year it was. In every little detail of this book and all the different laws and all the different breakings of the law. So any thoughts? What weakness is there in the Mosaic Law? It is a law given from God. Yeah, it can't be kept by sinful people. And how long did it take to break it? Yeah, I mean, they probably broke it in their hearts immediately, but even just breaking the outward meaning of the first commandment, having no other gods, they ratify the covenant, the people of Israel do. They have this great moment with the 70 elders on the mountain. They come back down, and God says, all right, Moses, you come up here, and I'm going to give you the pattern of the tabernacle so you can worship me the right way. And while they're up there, sometime in those 40 days, they've already broken the covenant. So I think that's helpful to realize, though, that they never actually kept the covenant. It was only in effect for at most about a month. And everything after that was just God being gracious to the people. They had broken it so many times. But, okay, so what weakness was there? You've said that it couldn't be kept. Any other weaknesses in the Old Testament law? Yeah, true. Yep, so Constance said, good, you had the mic on, I won't repeat it. Any other observations? Good point. Jacob. Yeah, it just had served its purpose. It's true what you say about a specific people. It really isn't scalable, the Old Testament law. If God wanted the whole world to worship him, of course he did and does, he couldn't have just said, all right, everybody go to Jerusalem. You know, at some point that becomes impossible. Had never thought of that, but yeah, it really wouldn't have worked to do what Jesus has done. Any other thoughts? And then we got one more question. That wasn't a long break, I realize I gave you. How can we communicate this to people who still have their hope of salvation in the law? I know we've got some people with family that's Seventh-day Adventists and stuff, and I don't want to claim that they all have a work-righteous view of salvation, but there are a lot of churches even that teach more of a gospel of works, contradiction in terms, you know, but they really emphasize works more than salvation by grace through faith. Any ways, anybody ever had success in communicating to someone the good news nature of the gospel, the superiority of Christ and how he's done everything? Somebody who really felt that they were saved by works? You ever had any experience with that? Go ahead. Ah, okay. Bunch of Mormon friends. I'm repeating for the or could you just pass her the microphone? That way Carol and whoever else is watching. There you go.
I have a bunch of Mormon friends, and they're always talking about works that they do and how good it looks for God, and I'm doing it for God. And I say, well, I do my works because of God, not for him. He died for me, and I'm saved through him because of what he did, not by what I do.
Yeah.
And I keep using those examples. Am I reaching them? Who knows? But at least they're hearing the message.
Yeah, good. That is definitely a work-based culture and religion. Were you going to say more, Mark, or you just want to hold the mic? Okay. Kayla has her hand up, so could you pass her the mic? Thanks.
I would say, too, that even if there hasn't been like a big light bulb moment, God says in the Bible that, like, if you talk about Jesus and the gospel message, that is how the Holy Spirit works faith in people. So even if you might not realize it at the time, it could still work faith in people.
Yeah, that's a good point. And really, you might think if you got a friend who's a Mormon, or maybe even more so if they go to another church, but their church seems to just emphasize works, and every time you have a religious conversation, it seems like the first thing they say is, yeah, you know, I don't like gays or something. And you get the sense they don't really hear the gospel that much. That's evangelism. That's sharing the gospel. Even if they have a church, but they don't hear the gospel that much, they still need to hear that Jesus died for them, that they're saved by grace, that their works mean nothing before God. And so that sometimes those might be easier conversations to get into because they're religious and they're happy to talk about it. And they might be harder conversations to have in some ways because you might have different ideas about salvation and they might be very subtly different. But just an encouragement, those are good conversations to have. We got a lot of, families in our school with different church backgrounds. Some of them I think are pretty Bible-based. Others I'm pretty sure are pretty works-based. A handful, I think they're more like social clubs, but I don't know. I haven't been there. I do sometimes watch the sermons of people who go to our school, their pastors, and the churches they attend just to see what they're hearing, and it's definitely a mixed bag. And we all have, friends and family who go to different churches, I think, so plenty of opportunities, especially this summer if we're visiting. We got people in from out of town, things like that. Any other thoughts on how we can communicate to people who have their hope of salvation in the law? Yeah, very good point. Kind of similar to what Kayla was saying. You know, his word will work in its way, in its time, and so our job is just to share. We shouldn't really expect that in a certain conversation, even if you do kind of persuade somebody, or if you do share with them something that really hits home, they're probably not going to express it. And even if they do, they're probably not going to let on if this is a big change in their thinking. You know, it's unlikely they're going to say, wow, I've been looking at Scripture wrong my whole life. Thanks for pointing that out. You know, people aren't going to say that, but more of it's planting a seed and it slowly gets watered. Yeah. Sure, yeah. And so that's a good point if you've got Mormon friends. And so even if you only have a few interactions with that Mormon person, but you're showing them the right way to understand the Bible, then when they read it on their own or even hear it in church, maybe they'll start to hear it the right way. And what was it? I think I heard 7 years is the average for when a Mormon with this Truth and Love Ministry has studied this, or I don't know how they came up with this number, but they said it's usually 7 years is what they estimate from the time someone starts thinking, you know, maybe I shouldn't be a Mormon. You know, maybe there's better ways to have a relationship with God, to the time they actually stop being a Mormon. And that's not from the first time they encounter someone. That's from the first time it actually dawns on them, I should make this change in my life, because it's a hard change to make. Yeah, true. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Luther is a good example of these things take time. Every now and then you do get this really instant, fast, dramatic conversion, but even then people still have growing to do. Any other thoughts there? Well, the next section is only 5 verses, so I'd like to just finish that before we close. We may not answer all the questions on the sheet, but it's Hebrews 7 now, verses 23 to 28. Anybody willing to read that paragraph? Thank you. Mark.
Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in the office. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest truly meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weaknesses, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son, who has been made perfect forever.
Okay, thank you. Maybe instead of looking at all these questions, I'd say there's one new thought that this section adds to what we read before. And can anybody find it? Maybe there's 2. Maybe I missed them. But I see one very clear thought that wasn't stated in the first section. That, you know, by the way, this is probably an early sermon, and that's why there's a bit of repetition, because when you're speaking, you repeat yourself more often than when you're writing. Yeah, that's what I'm noticing, because we've already talked about how he's better than Melchizedek, how he lives forever and all this, but that the old priests, they had to actually sacrifice for their own sins first, before they could serve. Jesus never had to do that. You know, he didn't have to atone for himself, and so that's another reason why he's a superior priest. Does anyone see anything else? And I think you probably could find a few different smaller points to make. Anything that's added in this paragraph that kind of goes beyond what we saw in the previous section? I think the first paragraph, we kind of already hit those points. Yeah. Yeah, so that he was appointed by an oath. And a couple weeks ago, we saw that the writer of the Hebrews makes a big deal of this, that the Lord swears by himself, that it's not just the Lord speaking, but even taking an oath on his own name. You know, he couldn't possibly speak more firmly than that. But other than that, I think it's kind of continuing in the same thought we've been hitting already. So let's jump down to application question 4. All religions lead back to God. That's in quotes, of course. What key thought from our study in this section shows that this statement is not true? And that could really apply to both sections that we just read. Mm-hmm.
Like I had said earlier, I think of the Bible passage that no one comes to the Father except through Jesus. So as our high priest, if a religion doesn't go through Jesus, they can't truly know who God is. And he's not interceding for them because they don't actually believe in him.
Yeah. So we need an intercessor, and that's what Jesus is. If you don't have an intercessor, you can't just access God. Any other thoughts? Good point. Dave? True. Yeah. Other religions are what you're taught in a religion class at university that religion is. It's man's attempt to understand the divine. And most religions are that. So I can understand why that's what people say. But this is the true religion that was handed down from God. God came into our world to reveal it to us and inspired it. And so it's different in character, and it's different in origin. Good point. Today, I don't know, what do you think about all religions lead back to God? Do you hear that kind of statement? I think. Yeah, that's what I hear. Everybody has their own path. I hear that a lot. And you know, the thing is, there's some truth to that. In life, everyone has their own path, but not when it comes to how you access God. I mean, it's true, we all have different gifts, different talents. We go different directions, but there's not like a different God looking out for me than you. And I can't just decide, well, I want to worship Vishnu, and Vishnu will be God. You know, I can't decide through my preferences what reality is a difference. Yes? Could be out of battery. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. And it's just very different, you know, just read the Old Testament. If it were true that all religions lead back to God, why would God be so upset about worshiping Baal? You know, why would the golden calf be a problem? I mean, it's just, you can go through the list. There's one way to access God, and it's the way that he provided, and he provides freely for all people. But you can't just make up your own way. Yep. Yeah. So that is, yeah, and those are hard passages usually for us to read, but you can't deny that he's not real sympathetic to other gods. Bonnie. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think when he has been perfected earlier, I forget exactly where, we saw some similar language, a perfect life or something. Well, were you going to comment on it? Yeah, so it's not that he wasn't perfect, but he proved himself to be perfect. You could also say he became the perfect sacrifice. He was our perfect substitute. Because even though he was perfect, just existing as the Son of God eternally, he wasn't our perfect substitute. But when he took on flesh and lived his perfect life and went all the way to the cross and rose, now he's our also perfect Savior. So I think it's not just perfect in the sense of without sin, but he's perfectly accomplished his mission. Kind of like on the cross, it is finished. It's not like he hadn't been perfectly doing God's will, but up till that point. But now, it's done. It's reached its final conclusion. I don't know if that's helpful. The word perfect, if it might kind of help in Greek as well. When we hear the word perfect in English, we kind of think without flaw. But the word perfect in Greek means more you have completely filled something. So there's this sense of kind of perfect fulfillment that you don't get in English, if that makes sense. But yeah, he certainly showed that, he was tempted in every way and was without sin. Before he took on flesh, he wasn't really tempted, but now he was. And, yep. Jesus didn't? Yeah, he never did. If Jesus went to the temple, the priests were the ones who actually slaughtered the animals. He would have offered things, presumably, in keeping the law. Interesting question, though. Did he ever offer a sin offering? I mean, he never would have needed to. But he probably did. With his family, they had Passover offerings and things. But yeah, the priest actually does the dirty work for you. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Well, you got to be trained and everything. Any other thoughts on that? All right, well, that's a good place to end. We got through chapter 7 and on to chapter 8, which is now a new topic besides Melchizedek. And then we get into, chapter 11, we get to a really different topic, but that'll be a few chapters. So, okay, we'll resume in a few minutes.